I gotta tell you before you hire me, I don't work cheap. This is all very, very touching. It's not really easy to like something you know nothing about.
3 years ago, and every once in a while you sort of feel the presence, but I don't know whether that's just because you...
What if the man we know as Clint Eastwood, the tough guy, the cowboy, the Hollywood legend, wasn't born fearless but forged by chaos? Long before he gained fame, he was just a human, bouncing from town to town during the Great Depression. There is no stability or safety net, only survival. Now, what shaped the man behind the squint, and how is he spending his life now, when he is in his 90s? Let's find out in today's video. Clint Eastwood faced brutal rejection, battled anxiety, and once crash-landed into freezing waters with death staring him down. And when he finally started to rise, he lost his father, the one person he thought would always be there. So, the question is, did Clint Eastwood become a legend because of his pain? Get ready to take a look at his inspiring journey. On May 31st, 1930, in a small hospital in San Francisco, a baby boy came into the world with a roar. 11 pounds of pure grit, so big, the nurses called him Samson. That baby was Clint Eastwood. Born to Clinton Sr. and Ruth Runner Eastwood, Clint came from a long line of mixed ancestry, including English, Scottish, Dutch, German, and Irish roots. Somewhere way down the family tree, a passenger on the Mayflower. That mix of rugged survival and old-world blood, it would shape more than just his name. The Eastwoods didn't have it easy at first. The Great Depression hit hard. Clint's dad bounced from job to job, salesman one day, would-be detective the next. The family packed up constantly, chasing paychecks across California. What does that kind of instability do to a kid? But by 1940, they landed in Piedmont, a wealthy town where everything looked picture-perfect. A pool in the backyard, country club privileges. It looked like they'd made it. But not everything behind closed doors was polished. Clint didn't thrive in school. He flunked out of junior high and had to retake classes in the summer. And that calm exterior, it didn't last. By high school, the rebel was in full bloom. A scorched effigy on the school lawn. Vulgar graffiti on the scoreboard. Not exactly model student behavior. He was kicked out not long after. So, where does a kid like that go? Oakland Technical High gave him a second chance. Some teachers spotted a spark and tried steering him into school plays. But Clint had other plans: fast cars, girls, golf, tennis, piano. He threw himself into his hobbies. One friend remembered him playing ragtime until his fingers bled. Can you picture that kind of obsession? And while he could have been a decent athlete, Clint always leaned toward things he could do alone. Fixing engines, studying aircraft, and tuning a piano in the dark corners of a smoky bar. That's where he found rhythm, not in classrooms or crowded fields, but in the quiet hum of machines and music. Did he even graduate? That part's fuzzy. Some say he just walked away, chasing freedom and thrill wherever it led. By 1949, his dad had moved to Seattle. Clint bounced around Oakland, crashing with friends. And then, pure chance. A Malibu party. A director named Howard Hawks. A conversation that cracked open the door to something bigger. But before the bright lights of Hollywood, Clint Eastwood was logging timber in Oregon, guarding lives at the local pool, and playing piano in dive bars for spare cash. So the question is, was it raw talent that lifted him, or was it years of wandering, working, and weathering life's chaos that built the man behind the myth? Was it just a path, or was destiny dragging Clint Eastwood exactly where he needed to go? Because after this, things didn't just change, they exploded. In 1951, the Korean War came calling. Clint got drafted. But instead of heading to the front lines, the Army stationed him at Fort Ord in California. His job? Swimming instructor. A soft landing, or so it seemed. But fate doesn't play fair. On September 30th, Clint caught a ride back to base from Seattle. What was supposed to be a routine flight turned into a nightmare. Bad weather rolled in. Then, chaos. The back door of the plane blew open mid-air. Clint rigged a temporary fix, but the radios died. The oxygen system failed. And the real kicker? They ran out of fuel. Somewhere in the fog, far from the California coast, the pilot made a desperate call: ditch the plane. Sharks circled the waters below, but there was no time to think. Clint and the pilot inflated rafts and jumped into the cold Pacific. What keeps a man going when he's battling the ocean? Clint's raft flipped in the waves. With nothing but darkness and exhaustion closing in, he swam. Some say 2 miles. Others say 4. Either way, that Army swimming gig, it might have saved his life. Would he have made it if he hadn't trained for it? He fought hallucinations. He watched glowing algae swirl around him in the black water. But somehow, he made it to shore, barely, collapsing near an RCA radio station. The pilot survived, too. Both men walked away from the wreckage that could have buried them at sea. Years later, Clint played Frank Morris in Escape from Alcatraz, a man who swam the deadly San Francisco Bay. That wasn't acting. That was muscle memory. That survival instinct turned into cinema. But back then, it wasn't all life or death. Clint hustled to make ends meet. His Army paycheck? Just $67 a month. So he took on a side job at a sugar company. Rumor had it that he was seeing the daughter of an officer. That could help open a few doors. A single visit to Carmel by the Sea left a lasting impression. Someday, I'd like to live here, he told himself. And one day, he would. He wasn't just hanging around nobodies either. Some of his Army buddies, Richard Long and Martin Milner, would go on to become stars themselves. Fast forward to the 70s. Clint traded cowboy boots for a badge. He became Dirty Harry, a rogue cop who didn't play by the rules. The man with the steely stare and a .44 Magnum. Why did that character hit so hard? Maybe because Clint had already lived the kind of danger most people only watch on screens. From Thunderbolt and Lightfoot to the Gauntlet, he blurred the line between justice and rebellion. But it wasn't all grit and grime. In the Every Which Way films, he threw punches at an orangutan named Clyde. Somehow, it worked. And then came Escape from Alcatraz. Cold, eerie, and brutally real. The role fit him like a second skin. But just when it seemed like Clint was untouchable, life struck back. While filming The Eiger Sanction in 1975, tragedy would come knocking. While filming The Eiger Sanction in 1975, Clint Eastwood faced something even tougher than the mountain itself: tragedy. The crew needed a few more shots of a tricky climbing sequence. Veteran climber David Knowles, working as a stunt double, teamed up with fellow mountaineer Mike Hoover to get it done. They secured the footage. The job was complete. But fate wasn't finished with them. Moments later, without warning, a rock slide thundered down the cliffside. A massive boulder broke free, unstoppable, unrelenting, and crashed toward them as they stood perched on a narrow ledge. Hoover was badly injured. Knowles was killed instantly. What made it even more chilling? Just days before, the crew had staged a near-identical fall. Same ledge, same setup. It was only supposed to be fiction. And now, it was real. One of the surviving climbers later described the horror of flying back to the site and seeing the exact scene they'd faked. Only this time, David Knowles was truly hanging lifeless from the rope. How do you move on from something like that? The news hit Clint hard. He was crushed by grief, burdened with guilt. For a while, he considered walking away from the film altogether. What if they had pushed too far? Was it worth it? But the crew rallied. They understood the risks of the job, and they believed the best way to honor Knowles was to finish what they had started, to let the film stand as a tribute to his dedication, his courage, and the cost of chasing authenticity. After that, Clint's character began to shift. They weren't just tough, they were broken, complicated, scarred. In Firefox, he played a pilot battling PTSD. In Tightrope, he was a cop haunted by the very evil he hunted. What happens when the enemy isn't just out there, but inside you? In The Rookie, his obsession with justice puts everyone around him at risk. And in White Hunter, Black Heart, his character became dangerously consumed, not by war, not by crime, but by a hunt for a single elephant. These weren't action heroes. These were men unraveling. Then came Unforgiven. The film brought Clint full circle back to the West. But this time, he wasn't a noble gunslinger. He was a weary ex-outlaw wrestling with the ghosts of his past. Could a man soaked in violence ever really wash his hands clean? By the 2000s, Clint leaned into a new role, the grizzled loner, the reluctant hero, the man who'd seen too much. In Space Cowboys, he played an aging astronaut who finally got his shot. In Bloodwork, a retired profiler chases a killer while battling his own failing heart. And then came The Quiet Storm, $1 Million Baby, where he played a hardened boxing trainer pulled into a bond that breaks him. Gran Torino, where a bitter veteran stumbles into redemption. These weren't just movies. They were emotional punches, stories about reckoning, regret, and reluctant hope. Even in Cry Macho, one of his most recent films, Clint returns as an aging cowboy on a dusty road through rural Mexico. He's not trying to be a legend anymore, just a man looking for peace. But after all these years, after the grief, the danger, the guilt, does peace ever really come? Or does a man learn to carry the weight? And what about Clint Eastwood's real-life story? It's just as layered and unpredictable as any film he's ever made. Maybe even more so. Back in 1953, he married Maggie Johnson. On paper, it looked like stability. Maybe he thought settling down would quiet something inside him. But it didn't take long for the restlessness to seep in. Behind closed doors, Clint was living a double life. While he was building a reputation as a Hollywood icon, his personal life spun into something far more complicated. Affairs became frequent, secrets multiplied, and consequences followed. One of the earliest was a daughter, Lori Murray, born from a hidden affair and placed for adoption. For years, Clint had no idea she existed. What would it feel like to find out decades later that you had a daughter you never knew about? Another affair led to the birth of Kimber Eastwood, this time while Clint was still with Maggie. Despite everything, Maggie stayed for a while. They had 2 children together, Kyle and Allison. But how long can a marriage survive when betrayal becomes a pattern? By the late 70s, the cracks could no longer be patched over. Rumors swirled about Clint's new relationship with actress Sandra Locke, and by 1979, he and Maggie had officially split. But this wasn't just a clean break, it was the beginning of another storm. Sandra and Clint's relationship, born on the set of The Outlaw Josie Wales, burned hot and fast. But behind the scenes, it was volatile. Locke later claimed Clint pressured her into multiple abortions, even as their relationship dragged on for more than a decade. It ended not just in heartbreak, but in bitter lawsuits and public accusations. And then there was Roxanne Tunis, a stunt woman Clint met on the set of Rawhide. Their affair reportedly lasted 14 years and resulted in another daughter, Kimber. At first, Clint claimed he didn't even know he was the father. But how many times could that story be told before it started to feel like a pattern? Some of his children, such as Kimber, have spoken openly about their complicated relationship with him. At times, they've described warmth and connection. But at others, loneliness, neglect, and the aching feeling of being kept at a distance. And what about Lori Murray, the daughter who only discovered Clint was her father through a private investigator in the 1990s? While he welcomed her once she reached out, one question still lingers. Did he never know? Or did he choose not to look? Eastwood's personal life reads like a puzzle with too many missing pieces. Children are born in secret, lovers hidden in the shadows, promises made and broken. Even as Clint Eastwood's relationship with Sandra Locke burned on, another secret chapter was already being written. Somewhere between red carpets and film sets, Eastwood met a flight attendant named Jocelyn Reeves. Their quiet fling would later bring 2 more children into the world, Scott and Catherine. But at the time, their existence was kept under wraps. What does it say about a man when his children are born in the shadows? And while Locke remained in the picture, Eastwood crossed paths with actress Frances Fisher. For her, it was love at first sight. Despite the tangled web around him, they fell into a romance that felt genuine, and eventually welcomed their daughter, Francesca. But how long could it last? The weight of past affairs, the strain of secrecy, and the relentless paparazzi lens didn't make it easy. Eventually, even that love story unraveled. Then came Dina Ruiz. It was 1992. She was a television news anchor. He was decades into fame, carrying a legacy and a lot of baggage. Their connection was instant. They married in 1996 and soon welcomed a daughter, Morgan. For a moment, things looked calm, stable. Clint even seemed to settle into a more private, grounded life. But fame doesn't sleep. A reality show centered around Dina clashed with Eastwood's famously private personality. Tensions escalated. Dina turned to an old friend, Scott Fisher, for support. And Clint? He quietly reconnected with his former flame, Erica Tomlinson Fisher. By 2013, the marriage collapsed under the weight of distance and disconnection. But just when it looked like every relationship would end in chaos, something shifted. In 2015, Eastwood appeared with a new partner, Christina Sandra, a restaurant hostess. No flash, no headlines, no tabloid drama. Just quiet companionship. Their relationship has stayed mostly out of the spotlight, but something curious happened. Christina began attending public events alongside Clint, his exes, and his children. What changed? Has Eastwood finally found peace? Or just maturity? In more recent years, the mystery surrounding Eastwood only deepened. When he vanished from the public eye for over 40 days, fans feared the worst. His last known appearance had been at the AT&T Pebble Beach Pro-Am golf tournament on February 2022, an event he rarely missed. Even when his son Scott competed in 2023, Clint was nowhere to be seen. Whispers of illness swirled. Was this the end of the road for the legend? Then, almost out of nowhere, Clint reappeared. Calm, smiling, in good spirits. He showed up at a conservation event in Carmel by the Sea, chatting with Jane Goodall as if nothing had changed. Photos of the then 93-year-old icon revealed a man who looked different, but not defeated. His hair had grown longer. A full beard framed his face. He wore a relaxed outfit that somehow still carried that trademark Eastwood grit. And he wasn't just posing for cameras. He was back at work, directing and producing Juror Number 2, a courtroom drama filmed in Georgia. Witnesses on set saw the same old Clint, focused, sharp, and totally in control. Behind the scenes, he sticks to a high-protein, low-fat diet. No flashy indulgences, just discipline. The kind of discipline he learned from watching his father die young from heart disease. It left a mark, one he never forgot. Now, even his son Scott follows the same path, lifting weights, counting nutrients, skipping the junk. Not out of vanity, but out of survival. Apart from this, he also seems fully prepared for his departure from this world, as in an interview, he revealed to the people he didn't want to attend his funeral. Tom Hanks, Leonardo DiCaprio. Their names are being tossed around in quiet conversations about Clint Eastwood's funeral, but not for the reasons you might expect. See, when J. Edgar hit theaters back in 2011, it was built to impress. Directed by Clint Eastwood. Written by Oscar winner Dustin Lance Black, starring Leonardo DiCaprio in one of the most transformative roles of his career. On paper, it had everything: prestige, power, and purpose. But behind the scenes, things were unraveling. The pressure wasn't loud. It was the kind of tension that moves in silence, behind locked doors, in tight-lipped glances. There are no screaming matches, no tabloids. It's just quiet friction that never heals. Warner Brothers handed Eastwood a thin budget, only $35 million, to recreate 5 decades of American political history. That's practically a shoestring budget for a film that needed aging prosthetics, historical sets, and the weight of time itself. And what did DiCaprio do? He took a massive pay cut from his usual $20 million down to $2 million. That's not a small gesture. That's commitment. That's someone saying, I believe in this. So, how did it go so wrong? Because belief doesn't always equal chemistry. Clint Eastwood is known for his no-frills, fast-paced directing style. He moves quickly. He doesn't linger. 1 take, maybe 2, and he's calling it a day. For some actors, it's refreshing. For others, like DiCaprio, who prefers to dig deep, rehearse, and obsess over nuance, it can feel like emotional whiplash. The two had different creative languages, and on that set, they never quite learned how to translate. So when people mention DiCaprio as one of the possible no-shows at Eastwood's funeral, it isn't petty gossip, it's history whispering back. So, what drives a man like Clint Eastwood to keep going into his 90s? It could be a legacy. It could be a habit. Or maybe, after all the noise, the secrets, the scandals, the fame, he's finally found something close to peace. Now, please share with us in the comments section how you learned about the sudden disappearance of Clint. Also, make sure to subscribe to the channel.